It's now time to introduce you to drops. Drops are one of those things that intimidate a lot of riders because there's so much commitment involved. It's not like a tabletop jump where you can go halfway and then roll through. You either do it or you don't, and that makes it pretty scary to learn. However, the funny thing about drops is they're actually very technically easy, way easier than doing jumps. And when you first start out and you're learning how to do drops, it's best to start on one single drop that you feel comfortable working your way to. Something like this that's not overhead, not too big, but just big enough to get the feel for it. And if you were to crash, the consequences aren't very high. There's a few things you want to look for in a drop when you're first starting out and needing a place to practice. Take this one for example. It's not too high. It's got a nice long landing. So if my speed judgment isn't perfect, I can land kind of anywhere on this landing. And I would have to be going really fast to miss the landing. And I would have to be going really, really slow to not make the landing at all. Like I would basically have to be rolling off this stopped to land in the grass here. And even in that case, it wouldn't be that bad of a run out. Something like this with no gap, a nice long transition, not too high, is perfect. If drops are very foreign to you, your first instinct might be just to roll down something. And on a lot of blue level intermediate trails, this is quite possible. They normally have ride arounds or roll through features. However, they don't always have a roll through feature, so you could end up in a bad situation where you're going over the bars on something like this. You could also end up in a situation where it is rollable, but you're coming into it way too fast because you've never practiced anything like this before and your speed judgment is off and you're braking at the last minute, and as a result, you end up crashing still. That's why I recommend finding a nice controlled environment, somewhere that has a singular drop like this that you can do repetitive movements on, keep practicing and get a hang of it. I'm gonna show you from a few different spots on what this looks like to drop and everything that goes into doing drops. It's quite a simple motion, you just have to commit. As you approach drops, the number one thing you need to know is it's very important to stay relaxed. That's one of the most important factors ever. Before you even drop into this, you have to be fully committed and know you're gonna ride it. Any bit of hesitation will cause you to stiffen up. You won't be able to control your motion in the air and you're gonna crash. So if you don't think you're 100% committed, don't even try. You really need to get yourself in that headspace before you're even ready to ride off this thing. Number two is you really want to be set up for it, and it's a really simple motion and it's all about timing. It's just like a manual. So imagine that same motion of being in a squat and then popping up and leaning back. Same thing, but not quite as aggressive. It's very subtle. It's more of a stay straight up on your bike, but go from being nice and compressed to pulling up, relaxing, getting your weight back a bit, and allowing movement in your arms like this so that you can control how much you're nosing into the landing. A lot of riders will get scared. They'll just ride straight off like they're normally in a completely normal riding stance. And then as soon as they get in the air, they won't expect it, but their front end's just gonna drop away like this. That's because they didn't shift their weight back at all, and they might have timed it wrong too. A lot of people get nervous, they get anxious, and they start pulling up too soon. They might be like way back here, and they'll start pulling up, whereas you wanna have your front wheel right at the edge of the drop when you start pulling up. Timing is everything, and that subtle movement, that subtle motion. So timing, subtle movements, and then confidence and 100% commitment. Those three things are pretty much guaranteed you to land a drop. Now, landing it smoothly is a whole nother element because when it's your first couple times on it, you're not really gonna know what to expect on how the landing's gonna feel, how much you need to nose in. You might be like front wheel heavy or back tire heavy the first few times, but you'll quickly figure it out. It's just that commitment and that light movement in the air. As you approach the drop, compress your body and preload, get in that aggressive position and prepare to take off the edge of it. Once you start to take off, allow your body to open up, much like you're beginning to do a manual. And as you're opening up, shift your weight back a little bit, drop those heels, keep those elbows nice and bent, keep that nice aggressive stance in those arms, and allow your arms to stretch out if needed, because as you go off the drop, if you're a little tight on your body, you can always open up by extending your arms. This allows you to control the front wheel to either pull up or nose in. That'll help you stay in a nice position with both wheels and allow you not to be nose heavy or back tire heavy. Once you see the landing, take a good look at it, spot the landing and the run out. I find if I look ahead a little bit instead of straight down at the ground, that'll help me prepare for the next feature. And if I'm always looking ahead, I'm always staying aggressive and relaxed and controlled. And then the landing is not so much of a worry, it's more about what's always in front of me. If you didn't pop enough or your timing was wrong and you pulled up way too soon, that means you're probably gonna end up in an endo position. If this happens, there's a couple things you can do. If you're way off, the first thing you can do is immediately eject and jump off your bike, trying to jump over your handlebars. It will be a crash, but you could possibly just have a nice slide out and not get too injured. The second thing you can do, if you think it's not deep enough of a nosedive and it's savable, get your weight back as far as you can and just try to drop those heels as much as you can and get everything on your back wheel as much as possible. Even more so than a manual, imagine you're rolling down a vertical rock face and you have to get all your weight back with your chest against your seat almost. That's what you want to do. Try to save yourself, try to get as far back as you can. And if it's a really bad nosedive, but not so bad you're going over the bars, that might just save you from sliding off your bike when you hit the landing. If you come into the drop a little too confident and you manual a little too hard, you could end up really back tire heavy. And worst case scenario, you loop out and fall on your back. There's a few ways to avoid this though. If you feel like you're way off and you pulled up and you got really excited off the start and your back or your front tire is way in the air, the best thing to do is just throw your bike, ditch it, try to get your bike as far away from you as possible and then land on your feet down on the landing down there. That'll be your best way to get out of it without an injury. The next thing you can do, if it's not quite that bad, but you still think you're gonna land really back tire heavy, which means when you land, you could loop out. The first thing you can do is grab your rear brake. The second you grab that brake, your front tire is gonna get dropped down and you could possibly still land both wheels at the same time. Even if you don't, if your rear brake is grabbed, that means that tire can't spin out and right away it'll touch you down on your front wheel. Those are two techniques you can do to save yourself from looping out on drops. I have no specific drills for you to learn drops, but what I recommend is you find a drop you're comfortable with, no matter what size it is, and keep practicing it, keep following all these techniques I'm teaching you, and do it over and over until you're ready to go up to the next size drop, and go bigger and bigger and bigger, and you'll find the bigger the drop, the easier it'll become because there's less to do in the air. The movements become slower, it's not quite as technical, and you have more time to set up and land. Now, to sum things up, here's the few main things you need to know when you're learning drops. Number one, it's all about timing. Pulling up right as your front wheel's at the edge, not doing it too soon. This could end up in a nosedive, and then doing it too hard and too late could end up with looping out. So finding that perfect timing, it's really not that difficult. It's just all commitment, and you'll really feel it out fairly fast. Number two, knowing what to do when you crash. You could end up looping out. If that's the case, remember to grab that rear brake or throw the bike if you absolutely have to. If you're in a nosedive, remember, get really far back on the bike, get on that back seat and even further back on that back wheel and try to ride out of it as best as you can. If that's not possible, you can always throw the bike down and jump over the handlebars and try to slide down the landing. Those are the best ways to bail out of drops. Get out there and keep practicing. Good luck.